Hello and welcome, listeners, to the true iteration of That's a Good Card. I'm Ya, and with me is my top 16 co-host, Kyle. Kyle's going to have the challenge of getting me to say, that's a good card. While Kyle will be doing the convincing, I'll be doing the unconvincing. Now is also a good time to remind you to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us. If you have thoughts that differ from the two of us, leave a comment below to let us know. Or you can suggest a card that you think can change the CEDH meta. Don't forget to stay tuned for our regular segment of That's a Good Card? All right, Kyle, let's get started. What card did you bring to us today?
All right, everybody. Today, I brought one that's a bit of a hot topic and kind of similar to one that we did a few weeks back in Rhystic Tutor. Today, I'm bringing a card recommended to us by my friend Antonio, who is a member of Team CEDH up in the Pacific Northwest, awesome Rogside pilot, and he recommended today's card, which is Demonic Bargain. Now, Demonic Bargain is 2 colorless and 1 black pip, 3 cost total. It's a sorcery. It reads, exile the top 13 cards of your library. Then search your library for a card. Put that card into your hand, then shuffle. And the flavor text reads, do not try to negotiate with me, human. You want power? This is the price. Quote, Ormendal.
That's a really
And
good
I'll
one.
give a huge shout out to the artist.
So
because
good.
this art is just incredible.
So
I
good.
love the artwork on this card.
It's
very
so
pretty.
good.
10 out of 10 card.
Yep.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 card art.
Yep.
Anyway, let's talk about where we see this card. And like I said, it's kind of been something that's a bit of a hot topic, so we decided to hop on the train and talk about it. So to start off, we saw this in a Rogside list at the Top Deck Invitational. I think that kind of probably sparked the little bit of a wave. I guess I would say it was like kind of like a small wave. It's not really a wave. It's a little ebb and flow, which is quite a few Rogside pilots starting to test this out. I did see a couple of other lists that do run this. I think there was less than 100 occurrences on CEDH Analytics, and I saw it in some Dihada lists, which is cool.
Yep.
But this is definitely like a turbo card
For sure.
So we see it in Rogside and we're seeing it in Dihada. I think that it's got some legs, so I'm excited to talk about this today. Are you ready for me to get into my points?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about my first point, which is very much based on the downside of this card. So very similar to our episode on Rhystic Tutor,
Yep.
which if you haven't seen that episode, I'll post a link in the description down below, because we're going to talk about kind of how close these cards are really and what they do, because they fill the same role. So the first part we're going to talk about is the downside. And the downside for this card is that you exile approximately 14% of your deck. So let's talk about like the likelihood that you're going to exile, worst case scenario, whatever the opposite of Magic Christmas Dreamland is, which is Yas Tuesday night.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is, the likelihood that you exile all of your win lines is incredibly low. It's only 14%. So like we talked about earlier, only turbo decks are really going to be playing this card.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones that are going to be looking past the consistent tutors that we're seeing, right? Those are the decks that need more than just the Vamp Tutor, Imp Seal, Demonic Tutor package, right? They need to go into those Grim Tutors, those Rhystic Tutors, those Beseech the Mirrors, right? These are the kind of decks that want this, and all of those decks are just pure gas. That's my first point. And that's why this card is being tested, is because, sure, you exile 14% of your deck, who cares? I'll just find a win line with whatever I have left. Realistically, these decks are probably running approximately a third of that being lands, so you're going to exile some lands, and you're going to exile some gas. The likelihood that you're exiling all gas and stopping yourself completely from winning is super low. I was kind of thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, if you're afraid of playing this card because you think you're just going to get unlucky, I think you're playing scared. I think you're a coward. It's like, look, are you playing 35 lands in your CEDH deck because you're afraid your mulligans are going to suck and you don't want to go to 3? No, you're not doing that, okay? So this is one of those cards that I love. It's the same thing with Demonic Consultation, right? Sometimes, we've all been there, you're like mulligan to 4, and you're like, okay, I have Demonic Consultation, if I can just like name a mana crypt, maybe I'm in this game, right? And that happened to me, this happened to me in my most recent tournament in Swiss, someone mulled to 3. I think it was a T&K mulled to 3, had Demonic Consultation, a land, and Rhystic Study, and they were able to name Mana Crypt, go find their Mana Crypt, and then turn to Rhystic Study, get back in the game. It was incredible. And that's not playing scared, and kudos to that person. That's the same kind of pilot that we need to be running this card. You can't be afraid when you're playing this card. You want that upside. You're getting a tutor to hand. Don't be afraid of the downside. That's my first point.
Don't disagree with that. Don't be afraid. I totally can get behind that.
What could go wrong?
For sure. Like,
what could go wrong?
I'm like, listeners need to understand something about me. It's like, probably from the cards I bring to the table, like that mentality is totally me. I'm with you right there. I'm with you. I can't wait to hear the rest of this.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's the first point, is the downside is really not something that you should be that scared of. Point 2 is it's easier to cast than Grim Tutor. This is going to be very similar to the Rhystic Tutor point that I brought up earlier, which is like we're looking for this new tutor to hand or some sort of extra tutor to hand that's going to be better than whatever is in this weird zone of Grim Tutor, Rhystic Tutor, Beseech the Mirror, right?
Yeah.
So you got that 2 colorless pips, super easy to cast off a Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, whatever, right? And then just 1 black pip. Very easy to cast. It doesn't have that downside of the anybody can pay 2, like Rhystic Tutor does, right? And then it gets into this weird point where, okay, if you're deciding between Rhystic Tutor and this card, it's kind of like, okay, is it more likely that you're going to exile all of your win cons and not being able to find a win? Or is it more likely that someone has 2 mana up? And I think that there's a good argument for the first one. I had to think about which one I said first. Yeah. There's a good argument that Demonic Bargain is better. This is what I'm trying to say.
I can see that. I see what you're saying.
And let's talk about this too, because we kind of mentioned it earlier. We got a lot of pushback on Rhystic Tutor for people saying, just play Grim Tutor. And not only, because we talked about how, the 2 black pips matter, but something we also didn't talk about is the loss of 3 life, which people brought up in the comments. Post-Nas, that's something that you really got to worry about.
Huge.
It doesn't have that same downside, I guess. And a lot of times, if you're ripping a Demonic Bargain post-Nas, you probably already have a good idea of what you have, right? So you got 40 cards in your hand. You really don't care if you exile another 14, because most of the time you're able to kind of find whatever you want anyway, or you have a good idea of what pieces you already have. I mean, maybe you can argue that if you're tutoring post-Nas, then you haven't found what you had. But at the same time, I think it's neither here nor there. Yeah. I think it's the same thing whether or not you're doing it post or pre. But anyway, I just wanted to point out that the loss of 3 life is something to think about. Cool. Let's get into my third point, which is kind of a fun aspect of this card. Kind of chatted about this a little bit with another friend, and it's kind of cool because this card seems so high risk to many people off first glance. And there's this idea of don't counter the tutor, counter whatever they tutored for.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people are going to let this resolve because, one, they want to see you whiff. They want to see you fail. The haters want to see you fail. So they want to see you exile 14 cards. They're like, sure, dude, exile 14 cards. Go for it. You got this.
13,
so they might
cards.
let this resolve.
13 cards.
13 cards.
13 cards.
Sure, yeah. Approximately 14%. That's where I'm getting at.
13 cards.
Because 99. Yep. Anyway, but there's a good chance that this is resolving. And the cool thing about that is a lot of times if we're playing these turbo decks, we might already have one in hand.
Yep.
And if we already have one in hand, then what we can do is use this tool to go find protection. So your opponents are going to let you search for protection for free because they think that you're trying to find the win con and they can simply counter the win con. So I think that's super interesting because not a lot of times are people going to want to let your tutor resolve if they're thinking in that same mentality of like, don't counter the tutor, counter whatever they tutored for. So if you can just use this, go find a Pact of Negation, go find Fierce, go find Force of Will, whatever you need to protect the win that you have in hand, I think that's super interesting because you don't care at that point if you're exiling 14 cards if you already have the win in hand.
Yeah, I really like the unique thing about this card is like you already kind of have a bargaining chip in it. Like, Kyle, you've got to let this resolve. Like, I'm going to have to exile the top 13 cards of my library, right? Before I can even search for what I need to search for. So let this thing resolve, right? Like I might just whiff it. Like the ability to talk the table into letting you do this, right? And like, even though I already have it, I'm just going to tutor for this other thing. And if I whiff, great. It's even better, right? Like if you whiff key components that may be a part of another combo, I think that part is like even better in selling. Like, oh man. And then you just have to play it up like, damn, I was really hoping I didn't hit that, right? Like something like that. And like the whole time you've got a win and you're just looking for a pact, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the third point. Is it's kind of a cool piece where your opponents are actually okay with your tutor happening.
Yep.
Which not a lot of times is that okay.
Yeah.
My last point is that the line kind of chooses itself with this card. So if you resolve this card, exile 13, Thassa's Oracle is one of the cards exiled. You go, well, guess I'm not doing that line. Guess I'm going for Breach. And now you're going to tutor afterwards. So you get to see what you're exiling before you're making the decision of what you're looking for. So because of that, you're streamlined into like, okay, what line am I going to go for? Like I said, Thassa's exiled, I'm going for Breach. Breach is exiled, I guess I'm going for Thassa's. Both are exiled? Well, that's rough, but I guess I'm going for Mnemonic Betrayal or Praetor's Grasp, right?
Yeah.
So like these are the kind and if all of those are exiled, well, GG, good luck everybody else.
I mean, and that's part of playing Rogsai or Turbolist, right? Sometimes you're just going to get blown out in some capacity, right? And you're not going to be able to come back from it, and that is kind of like, I mean, part of the reason people play Rogsai in the first place is you're always going for it. You're always going for it, right? In some capacity.
And you have so many different ways to go for it. Yeah. And like,
yeah,
I'm sure you're going to talk about that, but I would only recommend this card in a list that isn't really centric on one thing. Like my hesitation with doing this in Corvold is like, this is a Dockside centric deck. If I hit Dockside, my life gets kind of really freaking hard.
Yeah.
Can I still win without it? Yes, of course. But it gets really difficult when all my lines kind of converge to one line, whereas Rogsai or Dihada sometimes, I'm not super familiar with Dihada, so please, Dihada pilots, please correct me if I'm wrong. You have a couple more possible ways to win.
Yeah, I see.
So you're not 100% just locked into one way to win. So those are my points, y'all. I think that this card's pretty fun, and I think you can make an argument that it could go at the top of the list where, you know, we're talking Grim Tutor, we're talking Rhystic Tutor, we're talking Beseech the Mirror. I think it's up there. It's in the range. So what do you got for me? What are the downsides?
So I'd like to approach this from something people should understand about me is I'm not sure if I've talked about this before. I have been into rock climbing for the better part of 20 years of my life. I have done climbs up very high. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this, like, and been pretty far off the ground, 1,500, 1,000 feet, you know, that kind of a thing. And done things that you probably are questionable. So my idea of risk and maybe a CEDH player's idea of risk are two different things. And so I want to say that as I bring a dose of reality, I guess, to this is like, I'm not gonna lie, again, I'm kind of high on this card in the sense of like, I love that high risk, high reward kind of mentality. And so my first downside is something you already addressed, but let's just repeat it again for those in the back. 13 cards, while, yeah, mathematically, you're right. It's only 14% of your deck. 15%, I think, if you're at 98, or almost 15% if you're at 98 cards, like in Rogsai.
Yeah, if you're at like 85 cards. Yeah.
But I think that's like the first thing is like it's a kind of a gut punch right away, right? And like, this is one of those cards that, let's say it is good, but people will look to cut this real soon, right? That first one time that
it screws you over.
Screws you over, right? Like that's
it's a feel bad card.
It's a feel bad card. You're like, cool, I finally drew it. I'm gonna cast this thing. And oops.
Yeah, and we're going to see in the comments, people are going to be like, I played this card, I exiled Thassa's Breach, every single win line that's possible, this card sucks. Go next.
Right.
Like, it's going to make you salty, for sure. Shout out the Howling Salt Mine.
Yeah, and so you've got to really check yourself. Hey, have I listened to the latest episode of Howling Salt Mine and gotten my salt in check? Because if you haven't, and you're kind of like a player who, I think that this is your point of, like, you need to do a real gut check. And if you're not a player that can stay untilted, right, this is not necessarily a card for you, because like that first time that 13 cards, and let's say you've drawn like, a lot of cards, you've got a Rhystic out in play and you've drawn like 13, like the more that goes and you haven't found what you hit, right? And that's, I think, the worst case scenario for this. Like the floor of this card is like
super late game. You've gone through the majority of your deck. Like maybe you're down to like 50 cards left and you haven't seen a single win con, and then you go exile 13 and they're all right there and you go, nice.
Yeah.
Love that.
So my next point is like, and I'm glad you said that, is like, what situation are we really happy to cast this in? And so I guess it's more of a question that a deck builder is going to look at when they put this in, is like, can this actually get us ahead, right? Because the situation you proposed is like that you're already ahead, right? One of the better situations that you're looking for protection, right? You're already ahead and you're just playing this out to seal up the deal, right? A little bit more.
Oh, yeah. That's the dream. Like, if you have win in hand, yeah, obviously this card's going to feel good.
But I think that a lot of people, when they first play this, right, like, they're going to start thinking of this like as like a tutor, like a vampiric tutor, or like a diabolic intent, right? Like, with like...
And I think there's a lot of viability to that.
Yeah.
I think that, like, playing this turn one, because of those two colorless pips, just like Rhystic Tutor, you can cast this turn one. Mana Crypt, land, boom. That's it. That's all you need.
And so I think to your point there, like, if you are willing to gamble on a gamble, you may want to consider this card, right? Because like, who hasn't done it? Let's just raise your hands, put a comment down below. You've gambled turn one for like a JLo, and you discard you just entombed your JLo. So if you're not averse to that type of play, I think this card may be for you. But you do need to ask yourself, like, what situation...
And that's why the Dihada players play this.
Yeah.
It's because they know about gamblers. That gamble life.
And my last point is like, hey, when you've got to consider, like, again, like, I'm going to reiterate it again a little bit. My last point is like, is this better early game or is this better late game, right? And you've got to really understand your situation, what your window is, right? Because I think that the later the game goes, again, like, actually, no, I even as I sit here and think about it, it's like, oh no, I can see a situation.
It's all
where
situational.
It's all situational.
It's all situational. Yeah, it's 100%. Like, if you are in that game state where you have a Rhystic out and you've drawn 15 cards, there's a good chance that you have a win in hand or something close to it. So, I mean, it's a weird spot. It's like the worst time to cast this card is when you're halfway through your deck, you haven't seen a single part of your combo pieces or win line, and then you rip it. That's the worst case scenario. But even then, if you've gone through half of your deck, there's a good likelihood that you've hit another one of the tutors that's probably better for you to rip than this one. So, like, I see it, but I don't see it. The chances that you've, gone through 40 cards and this is the only tutor you've seen, and you also haven't seen any of your combo pieces, like, come on, get out of here. If that happens, you just scoop. It's just the worst scenario. You're just like, you know what? I'm going to rip it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do. My other point is not necessarily a point, but something that I know some listeners have kind of been asking us to do is at this point, and you've already touched on it, and so I'd like to go a little bit deeper into what type of decks you see this card going into, right? And I think this in like a Rhystic Tutor, we probably should have done it with Rhystic Tutors. Like, you have to understand what kind of deck you're putting this in, right? I don't know if this goes into... Do you see this in a Tymna Crom? I could potentially, but I'm not a Tymna Crom pilot. I'm not.
You could. Anytime you're playing a deck that just has a ton of gas in it, I think you can play this card. I think you can play it in Tevesh Crom too. Why not? Although Tevesh Crom has been seeing really bad results. Pour one out for all the Tevesh Crom players out there. But I think that any deck that's just all gas, doesn't matter, as long as you don't have that linear line. If you have a linear line that needs crucial pieces, do not play this card.
So not a Tivit.
Yeah.
Probably not Tivit?
Probably not. I mean, like, you could technically win in other ways on Tivit. But yeah, if you're playing Tivit, maybe not if you think Time Sieve is your only win. But Tivit also plays Thassa's. I guess that's really like a 1A, 1B type of deck. So if you only have two lines, you're kind of in trouble. You got to have that, like, backup plan, like third plan and fourth plan, like a lot of other decks have. So maybe I could even, like, I've been saying this, that I wouldn't test this in Corvold because it's so dockside dependent. But at the same time, at least in my area and my meta, everybody knows dockside is how I win, so everybody plays around it. So I've kind of been stretching out towards other ways of finding wins. And I think that if you're in a Corvold pile that isn't super streamlined to one, like, just dockside loops, maybe you could try it. I don't know. Maybe I'll test it. I'll test it and see how it goes. Why not? But I don't run... See, that's the thing, though, is, like, I don't run Consultation in Corvold. So, like, if I really want to play the gambling game, maybe I should just be on Consultation. Just name a card right away. Exile half my deck. It's only 1 pip.
Right? I mean, but I think those are good things to think about, right? These are good things to think about.
Now I'm starting to think about that in my head for a second. I was like, damn, that could be pretty good. Maybe I should just go on Console and Tainted Pact. Why not? I'm on Braiders. I mean... But no. I'm just kidding. Because Console is way worse, because you could exile 99 cards from your library or just lose. So that's a whole different story. I think that I could play this in Rakdos or Omnic, right? I honestly do. I think that on a deck like that where your whole game plan is to kind of exile... Does that mess up your lines, though?
Yes and no, though, right? Because, like, you do need some of those key pieces, but at the same time, like, think about situations where Omnic or Rakdos is doing its thing and looking for answers, right? And you end up exiling in an end step, right? Or, like, something pings and, like, you flipped over something you can't cast. A win condition you can't cast, and so it's gone already, right? In the natural occurrence of playing those decks, you definitely have, probably more often than you exiling away in the top 13 cards, your win condition, right? Like, you exile away your all will be one when you have only 2 black pips, right? Like, that is a real thing, and now you're hoping to hit mana in order to do that, or, like, you're in a really stacksy game where your people are pinging themselves and giving you cards, but now you can only cast, like, 1 spell a turn, right? And, like, you're like, oh crap, like, I have 2 of my win conditions in exile. If you're already in a deck that lives and breathes in that line and sphere, I don't think this is that much more of a stretch.
Okay, yeah. I guess maybe because I feel like I've only lost to, like, Omnics in, like, 2 different ways. Maybe I just am not as well versed against Omnics, but I feel like it would be a crippling blow if you exile all will be one, or what's the other one? What's the other big thing? I think they use some are probably on breach lines.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's the secondary way. I've definitely lost to them on breach lines. They're probably on breach grinding station. So
things to consider.
That's the thing, though, is because I've lost so many times to all will be one. I think, like, it's just like, oh, this deck is literally just all will be one. That's the only way they win the game. So if they exile that, then I'm like, cool. But I'm sure there's other ways.
I think there are other
probably
ways.
I mean, they're Rakdos, so it's like they probably have dockside loops too.
Yeah.
I highly doubt they don't utilize one of the best cards in the format. So I don't know. Hard to say. But anyway, we kind of went on a bit of a tangent, but I like that. I like that we're hitting on which deck list could possibly run this. I think that any good stuff pile that has a bunch of gas, why not? Try it out. We've also talked about another thing that I've been really wanting to push doing, which is talking about other cards that this could take the slot of.
Yeah.
And I think that this is kind of just in that same region. It's like, if you're testing Rhystic Tutor, maybe you should test this now and see if you like this more.
Yep.
It's probably better. Maybe not. Maybe so.
Let us know.
Yeah, let us know. Or switch out that Grim Tutor. Put this bad boy in. Live life on the edge. Live dangerously. All right, yeah. Let's talk about which point I made that was your favorite point for Demonic Bargain.
Dude, you hit me right in the feels, right at the with the first point. You hit me in the ego, and you're like, "Are you risk averse? Are you a coward?"
Are you a coward?
I have to be honest. Like, that is the point that you made in terms of, like, hey, like, this is CEDH, right? We're not like, let's not be too afraid to mull, right? Like, take risk where you can, and I love taking calculated risks with a little bit of, like, just gambling in it. And, like, this card for me is one of those, like, I don't need a hard guarantee. Sometimes, like, I'm not afraid to sometimes keep, like, a no-lander with, like, enough mana through artifacts and stuff and just pray that nobody hits me with a collector oof. Like, I'm not afraid to do that. And so this card strikes that chord in me quite a bit in terms of like there's a lot of reward here. And then, I mean, for me, it's like exiling the top 13 cards is like kind of thinning out the deck for me. It's like, yeah, I could have used some of that, but at the same time, I think there's just as much likelihood that I just get rid of like things that I probably didn't want to see given that situation as well.
That's true. And we didn't really talk about that. That's pretty true. We're even pilled to see the downsides first, right? And that's just human nature, right? We're always going to remember the things that stink more than the things that were actually good, right? You always remember the bad. So thinking about the potential of, hey, maybe you're just going to thin out a bunch of stuff that you don't need anymore. Maybe there's an oof on the battlefield. You rip this card and boom, 13 artifacts gone. You don't need them.
I don't need those. I wasn't using those.
That's the Magic Christmas tree. And you're like, I didn't need that shit. So there's a chance that you're hitting all the stuff that you don't want to see just as much as you're hitting the stuff that you do want to see.
I agree. All right, Kyle. What point of mind do you think supports it not being as good or something to not consider?
I think something that... See, that's the thing. I don't know. Like, the 13 was your first point. And I feel like that the argument against that is it's something that I immediately already thought about. And I'm like, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with 13. Sure. If it said 30, okay, now this is a problem.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm okay with that. So let's go through that list. Good with that. Number 2 was, what situation are we happy to cast it in? Are we casting it all the time? Like, where are we at? I think I'm happy casting this in multiple scenarios. 1, early game, obviously, because there's a lower chance of me, hitting something that I really want. Or 2, in the late game, when I'm ready and set up to win, I'm okay with casting this too. So that weird zone of like, you've potentially drawn a bunch of cards or used a bunch of cards and you haven't seen what you want to see, I feel like that's so unlikely that I'm okay with that too. And just kind of pushing that as like, okay, then you're just unlucky at that point. You're just unlucky. So now we're at this point where, from your downsides, because I kind of blurred your second and third downside together in one point, but it's okay. I'm just kind of in this weird spot where, to be honest, I'm not necessarily sold by any of your downsides. I'm sorry, y'all.
No. I mean, I think I already kind of mentioned, like, I'm kind of high on this type of card.
I mean, yeah. If I have to pick one, I'll say the 13. For sure. We'll put it out there. Because if it didn't have 13 exiled cards, this would be a staple. I'll throw that out there. We'll pick that one. I don't know. I still might test this card if it was 20.
Actually,
probably not. Okay, never mind. I think 13 is like the perfect point. I think WotC did a good job of balancing this, where it's like, okay, 13, that's kind of a lot. You're getting up there. All right, y'all. Were you convinced? Let's wrangle us back in here. A lot of laughs this episode.
That's good. It's one of those
cards. Were you convinced? Is Demonic Bargain a good card?
You would think that I would say like a unanimous yes on this one, but I think the more I kind of think about it, and like kind of look at the makeup of the meta right now and whatnot, like. I think that it's a pretty okay card in very specific decks. I think that I'm really excited to see what people think about this card as we bring it into some more discussion, but I have a very tepid, like, okay about this card.
Wow. That's spite because I said that your points weren't good enough.
No. Like, I know my points were like, I
swear 3 minutes ago you just said you were sold on the card. What happened? What is this? What a twist.
Here's something I just thought about. I just thought about, and somehow I kind of skipped over it when I was writing down my notes for this. It's like, I think that at the end of the day, for a card that does almost a similar thing as a Demonic Consultation or a Tainted Pact, it just costs a little bit more than I'd like to pay for it. Right? Like, considering, it's not as big of downside. It's like a very guaranteed 13 cards, like, or like a 6, like in a in Demonic Consultation.
Yeah, you're not going to lose the game off
I'm not going to lose the game off of it necessarily.
In theory, you could exile all your winnable things, but hey, draws are still worth 1 as of the time of this recording.
I am going to just I'm going to test this out, and hopefully in our next kind of Patreon update, I will be more brave and jump on this is a great card wholeheartedly. But like without testing, I think that I'm trying to turn a new leaf. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm trying to give this a tepid yes. Sure, it's okay.
A tepid yes.
Tepid yes.
So we convinced him from the okay to now a tepid yes. I'll accept that.
Okay.
That means yes. I'm taking the yes. I'm not even going to take the oven. We did it, guys. We convinced him. Wow. It does, you were kind of touching on it a little bit. It is a higher cost. It's a bit of an ouchie off of Adnaz. A little smooch of 3 damage. Mwah. But, at that point, it's just a Grim Tutor hits you for 3. Okay.
Right.
So.
Right.
Okay, haters. Anyway, all right, y'all. Are you ready for That's a Good Card?
Yes, I am.
Our favorite segment that we like to wrap up the podcast with, where I will be giving Ya the name of an obscure Magic the Gathering card, and it is Ya's job, as well as you, the listener, to try your best to guess everything about the card. Color, type, power, toughness, if it's a creature, whatever. Even the art and the flavor text. So, Ya, are you ready for your card?
I'm ready for my card.
All right, this week's card is Singing Tree.
Singing Tree?
Singing Tree.
Singing Tree is absolutely green. It's green.
Absolutely. Slam
green. Slam dunk. Slam dunk green. It's going to be in...
Boy, are you going to be mad.
I know. It's going to be... gosh, I want to say it's an enchantment.
Okay. The Singing Tree. The Enchanted Singing Tree.
Enchanted Singing Tree. Oh, boy. It's going to be for, 3 colorless and a green. Enchantment. Singing Tree. The picture is literally... I'm going to go a slightly different route on the art, right? Instead of a tree actually singing, it is going to be like forest people singing to the tree, right? It's like it's surrounded.
Like it's the tree that the people go to sing at.
Yes, the singing tree.
Oh, that's the singing tree. Like we're going to meet up at the singing tree and go sing.
Yeah, and so
okay.
I think it's going to be like an anthem for Ooh, I wanted to say tree people, so maybe that means like elves and tree folk. We're gonna say tree folk.
The tree folk at the singing tree.
And then I think it's gonna be one of those. Every time a creature ETBs, give all tree folk creatures +1/+1.
Wow.
The flavor text is gonna be: we gathered to sing the songs of our people. Hear the songs of our people and rejoice. Quote, Tree Folk Shaman.
Ooh, just Tree Folk Shaman. Generic Tree Folk Shaman.
Shit, I don't even know if Tree Folk is it's an actual creature type. I just went with it.
Tree Folk? What do you mean? Whoa. My first EDH deck, Doran Siege Tower. My Tree Folk deck.
Oh, shit, really?
Don't talk trash on us, Tree Folk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm representing.
He's probably at the singing tree. Represent the tree folk.
All right. Man. What is it?
You did an okay job.
Okay.
We'll start off. It is green.
Yeah, of course.
Congratulations.
It has to be, right? It has to be.
If you missed that would have been an all-time fail.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
That would have been the biggest whiff in the history of That's a Good Card, ? So Singing Tree is 3 colorless and a green. You were correct.
Okay.
2 for 2 so far.
Okay.
Round of applause. You're doing great.
Yeah.
Now.
Okay.
It is not an enchantment.
Yeah.
It is a creature.
Of course.
Subtype, plant. I feel like they should have just put tree.
It has defender, doesn't it? I bet you it has defender.
Oh, you want to make a bet? Because guess what? You're wrong. It's not a defender.
Okay.
It says there's one activated ability. It's a tap ability to activate, and it says target attacking creature has base power 0 until the end of turn. So you can tap the Singing Tree to make any creature that's attacking have base power 0 until end of turn.
Sick.
And it is an 0/3.
0/3, okay. No defender.
Fascinating. Right? Yeah, so you can declare block with your 0/3 tree and then tap it before damage so that it never dies. It's kind of cool.
That is pretty cool. It's not bad.
It's kind of cool.
That's not bad.
It's kind of cool, right? I mean, it costs 4, but it's like you have an impenetrable defender. Anyway, the art is a tree in like a bog, and it has like a cutout on the tree that kind of looks like a mouth.
Okay.
But it's kind of hard to tell because like older art, it looks like the tree might be trying to sing. I think it has a mouth, but I don't know. It's really hard to see. But really, it's just like a bog, and there's like skulls in the water, which is kind of creepy because you think singing tree, you think it would be like
Yeah.
la la la,
Yeah,
like
for
Sound
sure.
of Music in the meadow, you know? But it's not that. There's like a lot of dead things underneath the singing tree, so so watch out for the
It's
singing
way more
tree.
grim than I
But
thought.
Anyway,
All right.
yeah. But there's no flavor text, but I really like yours. I think the next printing will just slap that on there.
I'm hoping. You hear the Miwatsi? Singing tree.
Boom.
Anthem.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast on Demonic Bargain. And thank you so much to Antonio for today's recommendation. If you would like to recommend next week's card, please leave a comment in the description down below. Nope, not the description. In the comments down below. Please leave... Oh my gosh, I'm a mess. Leave a comment in the comments down below with your suggestion for our next card. Also, let us know what you think on Demonic Bargain. Also, in the description, actually the description this time, check out our link tree for our links for all of the places we host our podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify, as well as check out our Patreon for exclusive patron content. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and we will see you next Monday.
Thanks all. See ya.